Hi, everyone. Stephanie here. What I have been hearing from many of you in the last couple of weeks is the need to bring together a couple of different frameworks or models related to reading, particularly for older, struggling readers, and how to make decisions about intervention and progress monitoring. So I'm going to attempt in this presentation to clarify and integrate some of the important models and frameworks that underlie the work that we do uh, with struggling readers in particular. So I'm going to talk about the decision-making model, the collaborative problem-solving process or model. I'm going to bring in the simple view of reading, and I'm going to connect the four purposes of assessment that are necessary for a school-wide reading model. So decision-making models are essential for implementing MTSS or any type of school-wide literacy model. You have to have a framework and a process for making decisions. Assessment is driven by questions, and so the problem-solving model gives you the framework for those questions. You're selecting assessments to answer questions in this sequence or cycle. The questions are driven by the simple view of reading. This model reminds us that reading comprehension is the product of word recognition and language comprehension. So if we have a student who's struggling with reading comprehension, we've got these two domains that we can explore, that we can ask questions about, and that can guide our selection of assessments so that we uncover why is the student not understanding what she reads. So this is my version of the simple view. I'm also drawing on McKenna and Stahl's cognitive model and on Scarborough's rope when I'm thinking about this. So this is sort of turning that simple view graphic on its side and representing reading comprehension as the product of language comprehension and decoding. And I'm just in a very basic way drawing out a couple of components of language comprehension and a sequence towards decoding. The four purposes of assessment are helpful to keep in mind when you are generating questions about why is a student not understanding what she's reading, and selecting assessments that are designed for the purpose, designed for the question that you have about your student. So screening assessments answer questions about which students are at risk. Diagnostic assessments go deeper into exactly what should we be teaching next to those students who need more support. Progress monitoring assessments tell us if the instruction we've provided is working. And assessments that are good for diagnostic decisions aren't good for screening, and vice versa. Sometimes the same screening measures can also be used for progress monitoring. So let's walk through an example, and we'll start with the first step of the collaborative problem solving model. The first question is, what is the problem? And problems are defined as the difference between what's expected of the student at this grade and time of year and what the student is actually doing. So this is a measurable statement about the problem. Screening data is really useful for defining the problem for students in that kind of measurable set of descriptions, the difference between expectation and actual performance. Then we would be digging deeper and asking, why is the problem happening? The screening data can often provide some initial explanation to the analysis of the problem, but we may also at times need to do additional assessment, and this is where diagnostic assessments come into play. Screening data will help us narrow the scope. In which domains do we need to do diagnostic assessment? That is going to, again, be informed by that simple view of reading. The diagnostic data lead us directly to what we should do about it. So we're kind of narrowing in here on designing instruction that matches the specific skill deficits that are uncovered in the diagnostic assessment. And as we're planning what we should do about it, we should be thinking about the fourth step of the collaborative problem solving model, thinking about how we're going to measure, is it working? So we should be planning not just instruction, but planning the progress monitoring in step 3. Looking ahead to step 4, how will we know if it's working or not? Progress monitoring helps us answer that fourth question. So at the beginning of second grade, we might have students who are screened on reading comprehension with indicators such as oral reading fluency. You'll see that commonly in a variety of universal screening tools, some available for free download like Acadian's Reading. And if a student is not demonstrating grade level reading comprehension as indicated by oral reading fluency, accuracy, words correct, and retell, then we would ask, is the reading comprehension difficulty caused by a lack of grade level language comprehension and or a lack of word recognition and decoding skills? So we could perhaps simply assess the language comprehension domain by reading that same second grade passage out loud to the student, or a different second grade passage out loud to the student, and ask the student to do a basic retell or respond to some comprehension questions. So in other words, if we read the passage to the student, can he understand it? And we would be investigating the word recognition strand by looking at the component scores on oral reading fluency. So we would be seeing in second grade material, the student is not comprehending based on the retell and words correct score. We would look at the accuracy score as the next sort of leading us into diagnostic information. The next step is the reading comprehension difficulty caused by a lack of word level and decoding accuracy. And if so, we might be chaining backwards through this sequence to look at the student's ability to do basic phonics and understand the alphabetic principle. And we might have a screening indicator of that with a measure like nonsense word fluency, if we've used Acadian's Reading, for example, at the beginning of second grade. And so this is going to lead us into also, if the student is struggling with nonsense word fluency, possibly investigating their phonemic awareness skills with an indicator like phoneme segmentation fluency. So all of this information is going to inform what the problem is, why it's happening, and that would lead us to planning instruction for a second grade student. So here is an example of how this particular student at the beginning of second grade might look and what this would perhaps look like in a table format. So the first step of the problem solving model is the question, what is the problem? And screening data can help inform an answer to that. We want to have a measurable statement about the difference between what the student can do and what is expected. So at the beginning of second grade, we expect students to read grade level text accurately, fluently, and for meaning, but John is not understanding what he reads. In the second step of the problem solving process, we would ask, why is this problem happening? And we would use the simple view of reading to guide the generation of questions. We would have questions both about language comprehension skills and questions about word recognition or decoding skills. Our screening data might help us answer some of those questions. And when we can't answer these questions with screening data, we would need to choose a diagnostic assessment to answer the remaining questions. So does John have language comprehension? Simply reading the grade level text to him and asking questions could help to answer that. So in this case, this example that I'm using, language comprehension is ruled out very simply. Then we would ask questions related to his word recognition skills. We might have some data from the screening assessment. For example, if we were using Acadience reading, we would screen with nonsense word fluency at the beginning of 2nd grade. And let's just say in our example, he can read CVC words perfectly accurately and automatically. So that might lead us to ask questions about not just his basic phonics skills and the alphabetic principle, but what phonics patterns beyond CVC does he know and not know? And the screening data won't inform that. We need to select a diagnostic assessment in the area of phonics and decoding to answer those questions. And we might use something that's available for free download online, something like Really Great Readings Decoding Survey, to answer that question. And we might find out in that diagnostic decoding assessment that there are some patterns he can read accurately and automatically, but some patterns that he's struggling with, like the examples you see here. And we could ask whether or not he can segment phonemes. Is his difficulty with decoding and with reading text fluently related to difficulty with phonemic awareness? And again, if we have screening data from when he was in 1st grade, we might be able to see his performance on an indicator like phoneme segmentation fluency. And in this particular scenario, he can segment spoken words into phonemes. He doesn't have difficulty with that. So I probably don't need additional diagnostic data in the area of phonemic awareness. Knowing that he can segment phonemes is going to set me up for planning the instruction that we're going to provide to him. So that's step 3 of the problem-solving model. What should we do about it? And here's where our intervention planning is linked directly to the assessment data. So we're going to be teaching exactly the patterns that he is missing. We're going to be practicing those patterns in controlled decodable text, building accuracy first and then fluency. And that explicit phonics lesson is going to follow a sequence of starting with a phonological warm-up. We can work on phonemic awareness skills beyond segmentation. So we could work on advanced manipulation skills, working with phonemes as the warm-up within that explicit phonics lesson, then building to phoneme grapheme mapping in these patterns that he is missing, explicitly modeling, practicing with support until the student can read that pattern accurately, and then providing enough practice of that pattern that he can become fluent. Also building in the writing of those words, so spelling integrated into that explicit phonics lesson, and culminating with lots of practice in controlled decodable text. So while we're planning that intervention or instruction, we need to consider how we'll know in step 4 if our instruction is working for him or if we need to change our instruction. So we have to plan for progress monitoring as part of our instructional or intervention plan. So we're going to progress monitor with oral reading fluency, specifically the accuracy score. So as we're working with John, we're continually asking over time, is it working? And we're reviewing that progress monitoring data to watch the accuracy score specifically. And if it's not going up fast enough, then that gives us an indication we might need to reconsider the instructional plan. So in summary, we should start with screening that helps us answer questions. Is a student at risk? Is a student on track for successful reading in the future? And help us to define the question in the difference between what's expected and what's actually happening. Get that real clear problem definition. Then we can use the simple view of reading to test back, so to speak, to find the lowest skill that the student hasn't yet mastered, If we need more information, we would conduct diagnostic assessment in that skill area. That would give us enough to go on to start our instruction so that we're teaching in the lowest skill that the student hasn't yet mastered. So we're lining up our progress monitoring to that lowest skill area. So I hope this is helpful for bringing together a couple of different components related to the science of reading. I hope this will help you bring that information to your work with students in the classroom.